All right, Shalom. First and foremost, before I begin this lesson, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Racha HaKodash. I want to go out to the apostles, elders, great millstone, everyone teach well. Shalom, Barakiam to you, brothers and sisters out there. All right, this is the brother Malachi from the Great Millstone National Camp. And Lord, willing that this lesson is edifying to the hopeful elect. All right, so I got this video pulled up from Dabu 7, and it says, the title, it says, "It Could Be Tomorrow. California's top earthquake expert sounds alarm on the big one." All right, and reading a little bit, it says a new peer-reviewed study found that the fault system running beneath Los Angeles and the Inland Empire is carrying more stress today than at any point in the last millennium, and that a single rupture could tear across both the San Andreas and San Jacinto faults at once. Right, which I did a little bit of research into this, because you have this movie called San Andreas it's called San Andreas, and from what scientists are saying, all right, because I asked I didn't really ask, I said it because after doing some research, according to what they're saying, the San Andreas movie would be highly exaggerated. Right, but it says the 2015 action film San Andreas heavily exaggerates real-world seismology. Hold on, I might have to sneeze. Sluggy. Okay, now we're good. It says featuring impossible magnitude 9.6. And see, you can't say that. You can't say that. Because anything is possible with the Lord. You know, we're at the end of this thing. You know, judgment is getting ready to go out. So, technically speaking, according to science, they say that, you know, a magnitude 9, you know, at that, say, yeah, let me just read the rest of it. It says, featuring impossible magnitude 9.6 earthquakes, ground-splitting chasms, and massive tsunamis along a land-based strike-slip fault that cannot scientifically produce them. So you can read this, you can look this up, read this for yourself, why it's considered inaccurate. Now, what I'll say is, you know, they obviously know more about earthquakes than I do. But at the same time, and I'm not saying that movie, you know, is going to be like the movie. I'm not saying that. But scientists can be shocked, right? Things happen that scientists can't explain, and things go beyond what they expect. You know, it's pretty common that stuff like that happens. They don't know everything, right? They're not God. Okay, but in terms of what's more realistic, which regardless, it's still bad, right? If we woke up, which it's 3 a.m. here, but if we wake up, you know, Friday morning, you know, Saturday morning, and there's a fucking 8.0 earthquake in the San Andreas fault line, that's going to be a big deal. All right, regardless if it's, you know, like the movie or not. You know, the movie, like we just read, is highly exaggerated. But this is what we would be expecting guaranteed if it did. All right, which it could be even worse. All right, because the Lord, you know, he does what he does. All right, but it says, what would happen if the San Andreas fault ruptured? It says a major rupture along the San Andreas fault, often called the big one, like it said in the description of the video, would unleash a magnitude 7.8 to 8.0 earthquake, causing severe ground shaking for up to 2 minutes. It would result in widespread structural damage, shattered lifelines, and massive economic disruption across California, though the land would not split open and fall into the sea, or into the ocean. That would be fucking insane. Now, you know what's ironic about it is, this technically wouldn't be the big one. All right, I'm going to get into that a little later, what I mean by that, because there's going to be a much greater earthquake than we've ever seen in the history of mankind. And that's going to be by way of the nuclear destruction. All right, when it talks about the earth shaking to and fro like a drunkard, that's going to be the worst earthquake. All right, but, we're going to go into this a little bit, right? So I believe I asked another question. Yeah, it said, how many lives would be at risk? Would this be the worst quake we've ever seen? It says, a major rupture of the southern San Andreas Fault would put millions of lives at risk from severe shaking, but it would not be the worst earthquake the world or even the U.S. has ever seen. In terms of magnitude or global casualties, that was the end of that sentence. However, because it crosses modern, densely populated infrastructure, it would be one of the costliest natural disasters in human history. And America's already heavily in debt, and engaged in war. So, you can only imagine what this would do, not only to California, but to the economy of the U.S. as a whole. All right, it says, it's locked for the sniffles. It says, immediate population exposed. Over 25 million people live in the immediate impact zones across Southern California and the Bay Area. Hold on. Yeah, and here's some worse earthquakes. Alaska had one in 1964 that was 9.2. Chile had in 1960 had a 9.5. So I believe what they were saying up there, or about the San Andreas, is they don't believe the San Andreas would be able to produce a 9. But it could be 7.8 to like 8.2 or something like that. But we'll see. We'll see. Regardless, the big thing that this shows as well is that we're at the end. And somebody in the comment actually threw shots at the scriptures and said, oh, this ain't gonna happen. Just like how, Christians have been saying for over 2,000 years that Christ is coming back. First of all, we're not Christians. We're not. Well, technically we'd be the real Christians, but that was a derogatory term. All right, we are followers of the Anointed, yes. We follow Yahweh Shai, that's his name. All right, we worship Yahweh by Shemal Shai. But then somebody replied to them and said, you're proving the Bible right. Because, how the scripture says, in the last days, there'll be scoffers. All right, and then, where's the promise of his coming? All that bullshit. Yahweh Shai is coming back. All right, and we're seeing things, really ramp up more and more here. So Matthew 24, verse 7 to 8, this in red, it says, for nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Okay? Which that connects with 2 Ezra 16, right? When it talks about these are the beginning of sorrows. All right, but it said earthquakes, which we've already been seeing a lot of earthquakes, but this would be major, right? This is a big deal here. All right, so we read into that. Let's just get a few scriptures. Matter of fact, I had one here. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 1, down to, I'll just get down to 6. It says, but of the times and the seasons, brethren, ye have no need that I write unto you. For yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. But ye, brethren, are not in darkness, that day should overtake you as a thief. Ye are all the children of light, and the children of the day. We are not of the night, nor of darkness. Therefore let us not sleep as do others, but let us watch and be sober. So, and that's exactly what we're going to do, right? Because what else do we have to do except watch prophecy? Sirach 39:1. We're waiting for our Lord to come back. We're hastening his coming. So of course we're going to be looking, all throughout the news, all around us, keeping our head on the swivel. That's another thing. Be circumspect. All right, because the more these prophecies continue to happen, what's another prophecy? Persecution. You could be walking into your job one of these days and the feds roll up on you and and handcuff you, take you away. Just like that. On a Wednesday morning, you just walking into work and you're coming with us. And you just get handcuffed and put in the back of a car and then taken to a holding cell. Just like that. Your entire life is going to change. Because that's another thing that was spiritual about it. Because it says it could be tomorrow, right? The big one. And that's not just with this earthquake here, which once again is a big deal, but anything can happen tomorrow, right? I mean, we could wake up to a false flag tomorrow. We could wake up to big war news. Literally in the span of 24 hours, a lot of things can change, and we've been seeing that. So let me just get one more, and then I'm going to go ahead and close up. So this is the ultimate big one, when the nuclear missiles strike America and lay it desolate, right? 2nd Ezra chapter, and then that's going to cause a line of confusion. You're not going to be able to tell state to state, and that's when America's going to become that lake of fire for that period of time. All right, 200 million warheads. America's going to be absolutely decimated. 2nd Ezra chapter 6, and that's not what I'm saying. That's what the scriptures say. The scriptures prophesy a World War III, which goes nuclear, and that great whore, a.k.a. Babylon, a.k.a. America, the United States, will be destroyed. All right, 2nd Ezra chapter 16, verse 12 to 13. The earth quaketh, and the foundations thereof. The sea arises up with waves from the deep, and the waves of it are troubled. And the fishes thereof also before the Lord, and before the glory of his power. For strong is his right hand that bendeth the bow, his arrows that he shooteth are sharp, and shall not miss when they begin to be shot into the ends of the world. Which I've looked this up before, but let me go ahead and look it up again. It says the absolute longest distance an arrow has ever been shot is 2,047 yards, about 1.16 miles. 1.16 miles. Yeah, so this is obviously not talking about literal arrows, right? Because it says shot into the end of the world. It's talking about missiles, right? Which is going to cause the earth to reel to and fro like a drunkard. It's going to cause islands to be shaken. This is going to be the ultimate big one, right? So I just wanted to bring that out. Lord willing, it was edifying, interesting. Look into this, man. Because like they said, it could be tomorrow. Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Just wake up and the fault ruptures. That would be major, man. All right, so Lord willing that this was edifying. Before I close, I want to give all praises to Yahweh Shema Shai, Ba'Shem Rachak Wadash. Double honors go out to the Apostle Ezra Millstone. Shalom.